A few weeks ago, Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlord had perhaps one of the biggest and most game-changing mods come to it so far. The Old Realms, totally converting the medieval RPG sandbox into, well, the Old Realms, aiming to capture the grim, dark nature of Warhammer fantasy, and it looks awesome. You can actually play it right now. But with its success, there was a question that came up over and over again on forums and of course discussions relating to Bannerlord's modding scene. When would we, if ever, get a full Warhammer 40,000 total conversion for the new Mount & Blade? And well, I think it's time your prayers may just have been answered. I think it's not too controversial, if you would mind me in saying, but 40k is probably much harder to replicate than Warhammer Fantasy. Just the sheer scale of fantastical weapons, lasguns, chainswords, goddamn power armor, and the scale of all the worlds in the 41st millennia. Now, don't get me wrong, fantasy has its own fair share of the impossible to try and recreate, but at least there's still that base of Warhammer Fantasy around melee combat, basic muskets, and maybe even a bit of magic here and there. And it's already been proven that these have been done in Mount & Blade before. So when I saw Bannerlord's Siege of Vraks, and there was even some gameplay, I was so pumped for what is shaping up to be 40k recreated within this game. Some of you may disagree with my statement there, saying that surely Fantasy and 40k are just as tricky to add into the game, but I would point you to Mount & Blade Warband as an example. The predecessor to Bannerlord was flush with mods, with massive overhauls to completely new game modes and mechanical changes, everything from Lord of the Rings to Star Wars. There was even an incredible Warhammer Fantasy mod called Warsword Conquest, which I played quite a lot of. But do you know what there wasn't? There wasn't a Warhammer 40k mod, or at least a full overhaul. Were they planned for Warband? Yeah, of course they were. Everyone wanted a 40k mod, but there was never that true 41st millennia conversion for the last Mount & Blade. So perhaps there was a reason for this. Despite the lack of success in the past, what we can see so far from this gameplay is some brilliant promise of a 40k mod for Bannerlord. So this is the Siege of Vraks. But first of all, what is Siege of Vraks, some of you may be asking? Well, like everything in Warhammer 40k, I could probably spend about 14 years trying to cover every aspect of this occasion, but the Siege of Vraks was basically a massive scale military campaign. The Imperium's mission to reclaim the world of Vraks from these traitorous forces and later from the Chaos, but we're mostly talking about the Imperium here. The Imperial Guard, or Astra Militarum, raised a large army to siege this world. Their army mostly made up of regiments from the Death Corps of Krieg, Imperial Guards from the world of nuclear wastes, hence their cool ghetto World War I gas masks. Look, it's the Death Corps of Krieg who want their lives to end versus a group of guys that rebelled against the Imperium because I think the Imperium tried to snipe their pedo priest leader or something like that. Is that a good summary? Look, I don't want to see any of you glasses pushing nerds in the comments saying, well, actually, none of it is real. Just calm down. Enjoy it while it lasts, before Games Workshop spites down everything Warhammer from the internet. Let's all be happy nerdy families here. Alright, so after pissing off all the Warhammer fanboys, let's get into what this mod is about. So far we don't know all that much about the Siege of Vraks mod. It looks like we'll be covering a full campaign and of course be a complete overhaul to Bannerlord's single player. We do have news that a world map is being recreated and going along the lines of a front line system, with fortifications and positions around the world that the player needs to take, taking one to then advance to the next in a more linear style of gameplay. And I really do love this fresh look at something a little bit different to what we've had in Bannerlord mod so far. Not just trying to recreate the sandbox that we played over and over again in the game, moving through the world, getting your army, recruiting people, marrying someone and chopping off someone else's head. That's been done in Bannerlord. Let's do something a little bit fancier, and this more linear fortification style to try and recreate that siege in the history books of 40k, I think is a fantastic idea. I do love the look of the Death Corps though. We can see some of the models that have been added in, such as a few weapons as well. They look absolutely terrifying. The nightmares from my World War I gas mask dreams. I can just imagine myself as a Varaxian seeing these lads come over the mountain, and as we can see, it would be a terrifying sight. But as we can see, none of the gameplay that we have so far has got custom maps added yet. So it's still very early, but it does give us a great hint of what's to come in the future. So without further ado, let's actually have a look at some of it. First off, we get more of just a desert battle with the death corpse of Krieg. Horseback riding, of course, with that very German-style World War I backpack on. They look absolutely awesome, especially the cavalry riders that seem to be more plated up. The Krieg's guardsmen shooting from afar, and I'm assuming so far, using what feels like to be a remodel of the crossbow. Taking down Cadian guardsman after Cadian guardsman. Oh, it is a beautiful sight. As I'm editing this, by the way, I went to buy from Waterstones as I was making this, because I was basically looking into the lore of everything Warhammer. It's not blood, by the way. I'm not going to say what it is, actually, because I haven't confirmed a sponsorship with them yet, so it's powder of some... Oh, that sounds worse. Anyway, I went to Waterstones. I got into researching all this stuff. And look, I've been a fan of Warhammer for ages. I started collecting when I was like 8 years old. I've played most of the Warhammer games, especially like Dawn of War and stuff like that. But as soon as I started looking to the lore, I was like, okay, this is just a rabbit hole of everything. So I went to Waterstones and I picked up Cadia Stands. I have actually asked on my community tab what the best books to start with. This wasn't one of them, but this was the one they had. And because we're talking about, of course, the Cadian Guardsmen, I thought it would be an interesting one to look into. But we don't care about that, Resident. Get back into the video. But then we get to move on to something a little bit more interesting. The actual sieges. Now, as I mentioned, keep in mind, the siege itself is still a Bannerlord castle. There's nothing all that special there. Same with the battering rams and things like that. But supposedly these will all be changed in the future as the mod progresses, but we get to see the massive scale of the campaign that we're going to be able to play here. The Cadian Guardsmen obviously getting the majority of the kills as they shoot from the walls to start with, but as soon as the wall is battered down, it's time for these Krieg's Guardsmen to do their thing, sniping them off the walls, of course. And I do love the outfits. The capes and the shoulder pauldrons look absolutely beautiful, and whilst we can see it's basic so far, getting an idea of the attention to detail that's going into this game is fantastic. Now, once we break through the walls, we can obviously see the Cadian Guardsmen inside, and if I'm going to be honest, these guys are kind of my favorite. They're your very typical looking red shirts. You know, the cannon fodder that are just sent into battle to die? That's what these guys are, and you can kind of tell that, well, until the guy playing gets shot by one of them. But I do want to point you out to the channel this is on. This is Reznov Frieden. There'll be a link to all the stuff in the description. This is all his gameplay, and I'm assuming he's the guy making this mod, and I cannot wait to see what we can see in the future of this. But please, let me know what you think. Have you seen the Warhammer 40k mod so far, and why do you think that they weren't in Warband? Please leave your comments down below. I'll be sure to bring as much on this mod as soon as it comes out. I can't wait to bring more details and information, especially when we get a look at some of the single player. I think, as mentioned, the uniqueness of where we're going with this campaign could be something quite special and quite unique for what we haven't seen in Bannerlord before. So please leave a like at the video if you enjoyed it. Go and check out all the gameplay on the specific channels, and of course the mod DB page, even though it's a little bit lackluster at the moment. I think the mod developer actually does want some help, so if you go and check out the mod DB page, I think there's their Discord links and stuff there. So if you want to help out with that mod, you can do so. But please leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it. Leave a dislike if you didn't. But until then, I will see you in the next one.